I was getting ready to go make a presentation, and I felt like I was forgetting something. But then I remembered that they assured me that I didn't need the dental dams, the condoms, or the female condoms, because people in prison aren't allowed to have sex. So I knew I was ready, and I headed off. So I drove to the Adams County Prison, and I did everything you have to do to sign in and everything. And I went through the Sally port. You know what a Sally port is? So it's when you kind of go through one door, and then it kind of locks very ominously behind you, and then you have to wait, and then the one in front of you opens. So the guard takes me down the hallway into the classroom. It's really quite nice setup, glass like windows along the side. So I went in and kind of scoped it out to see what the setup was before the first class came in. So there's a dry erase board and, basically what you need. So I watch as they bring a group of men down, to get ready for the class. They're going to come in the classroom. You get kind of locked into the classroom with them, and then when you're finished, a guard comes, if they happen to notice you're finished, when you're done, to let you out. So the men are walking down towards the classroom, with their tattoos and their pumped muscles and their glistening skin. And I'm lying. I only said that because I practiced this story on somebody, and they asked me if that's what they look like. They look really... They look like really regular kind of guys that all decided to wear the same shirt that day. So they kind of came in and they sat down. So I started the presentation. I was doing HIV education and awareness. So, of course, the way that starts is that you start by talking about what are the body fluids that can spread HIV virus from one person to another. So, we're kind of cranking it out, and they guessed blood, so that was pretty straightforward. And then somebody thinks of semen. So, I'm writing it up on the dry erase board, and then they get stuck because, remember, it's a group of men. So that was pretty much, they couldn't. I was like, well, try to remember sexual behavior. Women have fluids too. So then they still kind of stuck because they couldn't really think of what to call it. No offense to the men. I'm just saying in general that can happen. So I write vaginal fluids, on the board, and then we get to breast milk. So we have the 4 body fluids. We talk about that's how it has to be transmitted. They guess saliva, which a lot of people do, but just in case you're a little waffling on that, it cannot be spread through saliva. There are a lot of public health people telling stories about how many gallons in a vat of saliva you'd have to swim in. I don't find that useful as an educator. I don't often find that people are making decisions about what risk they're willing to take. Am I going to swim in the vat of spit or aren't I? So I just kind of skip that part. So then we start to talk about, what are the behaviors? Like what behaviors put you at risk for HIV transmission? So we start knocking it out, sharing needles, sexual behaviors, things like that. So then we get to the part about what's the highest risk behavior, because when people are deciding, like, what risk am I willing to take? What do I need to do to reduce my risk? It's important that you know what are the really risky behaviors. So the highest risk behavior certainly is sharing needles for intravenous drug use, straight blood to blood, right? So that's a very high-risk behavior. So then we're starting to talk about anal sex is next, vaginal sex, da-da-da. So this guy says, hey, what about fighting? So I said, well, of course, every time I'm doing HIV education, people want to talk about fighting, biting, and spitting. So I write that up on the board with little commas in between it, fighting, biting, and spitting. So I said, well, what did we say? Like, what about the blood, the body fluids? Well, blood. And the guy says, and hopefully both of them are bleeding a lot. I said, well, we can only hope for the best. So I don't know. I'm not a fighter, but I think that, it's a fair fight. They're both pounding each other. There's blood everywhere. I said, okay, so one of the people has the HIV virus. So where does that have to go? It has to get in the other person's bloodstream, So they're thinking, and I said, I certainly can't say it's no risk. Obviously, there's some risk. It's not a very high risk. And I said, and I think that people want to talk about fighting, biting, and spitting because they're avoiding the conversation about how HIV gets spread most often, which is through sharing needles and through sexual behavior. And people don't want to use protection when they're having sex, so they avoid that by talking about this. And the men are saying, yep, yep. And I said, and plus, this fighting, biting, and spitting, it's not nice, and that's the truth.